what we realize is the relationship between the concept and the sound pattern, right? The concept is synonymous with signification. The sound pattern is synonymous with the signal. If we're looking at the primary source of meaning, in the example that I just gave you, that I just read from Saussure himself, what we recognize is the concept that we have of this as signification and as sound pattern. And that's right? The relationship between the signification and the sound pattern, the signification and the signal. What he said, I just want to read it one more time to make sure that you understand sort of the importance of meaning, because that's what's at stake here. And I think, it's a very, very, it's only a sentence, but this is very telling. The sentence is very telling. But in current usage, right? But in current use, and he says but. So this is, we recognize. Read it one more time. This definition raises the important question of terminology. In our terminology, a sign is a combination, right? A sign is a combination of those two things. But, however, here's what people are doing incorrectly. But in current uses, the term sign generally refers to the sound pattern alone, right? It's the case that this is still a problem, right? It's still a problem, I wouldn't say among professional linguists, but definitely among students, is that they believe that when they're referring to the sign, all that they're referring to is the signal, right? Or the sound pattern, interchangeably, right? So that when I'm talking of the sign, and this is it's a hard distinction to make, right? We're trying to understand the primary source of meaning. When I say tree to you, the fact that I'm saying tree is a signal, but it's only one aspect, or you can think of signal as also, this is just my way of saying, a trigger. Linguists often, especially during lecture, I think it's a great way of thinking of it, is a trigger. And you can even think of like the trigger of a gun, right? The trigger of a gun is what is responsible for sort of the ejection of the projectile, right? The bullet is ejected because of this trigger. Without the trigger, the bullet isn't ejected. In a sense, the signal or the sound pattern is a trigger for the concept, right? Or the signification, right? We know it's concept, sound pattern, signal, signification, signal. So, as I did in maybe a day ago or 2 days ago, which one of the videos that I did earlier in the series, I told you that I was going to say something, and then what I said as a sound pattern would trigger an image in your mind, as long as you and I were speaking the same language. And I said, I want you to conceptualize the figure, the image of a square inside of a circle, right? Remember that? So I said, okay, a square inside of a circle. And that's sort of the image that you had in your mind. And we could verify this because I could say it, let's say it was in class, I have all the students draw this image, and then everybody turns their papers up, and, provided that I was clear and the students understood properly, everybody should get 100%. It's very, very simple. It's an extremely simple example, but what it shows is the, at least at this point, necessary combination, to use Saussure's terminology, the combination of this trigger, me saying it or me thinking it, and its relationship to the concept, right? Its relation to how that term, how that sound pattern is going to be represented, right? So with respect to meaning, meaning is a result, the way that I draw it, just, and I don't want to go too fast, too deep, too quickly. By the end, I'll do something to show you sort of how I do this without words, but the way, just to give you an insight, how I represent this without sort of pictorial representations, I go like that, right? That to me, within semiology, this is sort of my shorthand for meaning, right? I just look at this image by itself and I recognize that this is a representation of meaning, right? And I'll give you an explanation of why this is a good representation of meaning in a little bit. The secondary source, so that's a primary, secondary source. The secondary source of meaning is the relationship between signal and, is the relationship between sign and sign, right? So a secondary source of meaning is the representation, or the relationship rather, between sign and sign. Okay, primary source of meaning in semiotics is the relationship between signification and signal, represented by this. Secondary source of meaning in semiotics is a relationship, and this is from Saussure himself. And actually let me see. There's actually another thing I want to do. Read. What is it that I wanted to read? The counterpart of the sound. Oh, okay, right. Just before I go on to secondary, I forgot one part. For the primary source of meaning, underneath I have like a little bullet point. The counterpart to the sound pattern, right? This primary source of meaning is the counterpart to the sound pattern. And I'll get to that in a second, right? And the question is, well, actually I have to address that now before I move on. So, let me get my notes in order, sorry. The counterpart to the sound pattern, well, we know that the sound pattern is here. So the counterpart to the sound pattern would be its signification. So what it's looking like, right? And you might anticipate that in some sense, the signification, and this is very, very important, right? The signification is, there's really no other way to say it, but the signification is the localization of meaning within semiotics. I'll say that again, right? It seems to be the case, and I'm going to find the actual, on the other hand, the concept is being, this is 159, and I actually put, in my book, it's 113, but in the original sort of pagination, it's 159. It's right under sort of the image of signification at the top and signal on the bottom. And I always get these arrows in a reverse order. So this one goes up and this one goes down. I don't think it really matters, but okay. The paradoxical part of this, on the one hand, the concept appears to be just the counterpart of the sound pattern, as one constituted part of the linguistic sign. On the other hand, the linguistic sign itself, as the link unit of two constituent elements, likewise has counterparts. So that's not easy to digest, right? That's not an easy way to digest it. I'll explain exactly what I'll read it. I'll explain the secondary source, and then I'll go back, read it, and then I'll sort of summarize it in like super layman terms. All right. Primary source of meaning, relationship between signal, signification. It seems to be the case as a counterpart to the sound pattern. We know our sound pattern's at the bottom, right? Our signals at the bottom, our concept, our signification's at the top. The counterpart to the sound pattern is the signification. So it seems to be the case, that's what's being said, and really what is being said, is that meaning is localized within semiotics for Saussure in the signification, right? That's not easy to understand per se, but that's what it is. I can't really make it any simpler than that. I'll say it again. Meaning, at least for Saussure, is localized within his semiotics, within his semiology, in the signification, right? Signification becomes sort of the localization of meaning. That's the primary source of meaning, is this relationship. And I'll give you an example in a second. The secondary source of meaning, as we said, and what did I put in the notes, is the relationship between signs and sign, right? Well, we recognize that a sign, as we've already said, and I'm running out of ink here, we recognize that a sign is a combination, right? A sign is the combination of the signal and the signification. It's the combination of the signal, the signification. It's the combination of the signifier and the signified. It's the combination of the sound pattern and the concept. It's all the same, however you want to use it. I stick to the traditional sort of Saussurean algorithm. It's a combination of the signal and its signification. Now, if we say that that's a primary source, so this is the primary source, then we recognize that we can compare signs, right? That we can compare signs. So that I can compare one sign with another sign. with this sort of SS relationship. And this would be our secondary source, right? So how does this look?